You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 38. Today I'll be talking to Michelle Avery Konczyk. Alright, so my name's Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. Art Affairs is my attempt at shining a spotlight on the many wonderful people that make up this amazing art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, telling their stories. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairs.podcast.com, but the best way to stay plugged in is to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're really enjoying the show and want to help support what I'm doing here in an even bigger way, check out the Art Affairs Patreon. Not only does it give you an opportunity to help keep the show going, but there are several community-oriented benefits as well, like early access to episodes and suggesting questions for upcoming guests. You can find all the information about that at patreon.com/artaffairs. And you can also connect with the show on Instagram and Facebook at Art Affairs Podcast. And on Twitter, it's art_affairs. All right, so today's guest is artist Michelle Avery Konczyk. Michelle works exclusively in watercolor and mounts her pieces on super unique and interestingly shaped panels, often trying to capture very personal emotions and feelings. We talk about how she first got started working with unique shapes on the show, as well as her experience growing in a family of super creative people, the recent break she took to avoid burnout, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Michelle Avery Konczyk. Michelle, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you on.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, sweet. So let's dive into your background a little bit. And from what I've read, you grew up in a small town in East Pennsylvania called Nazareth, which I believe was the home or is the home of Martin Guitars, which is interesting. But what was that area like where you grew up?
So it's a lot of cornfields. I grew up surrounded by cornfields and like mountain views. Very small. I did grow up in Nazareth, but like out of town. So Martin Guitar was very close. I've never been. So yeah, just I'm a country girl at heart. So
very cool. Well, and I, from what I read, and this is fascinating to me, because I'm not a handy person at all, but like your father and 5 uncles built your like childhood home from the ground up, which is amazing to me because I can't even fathom doing something. It's such a huge feat to me. Just thinking about it, I can't even do any kind of simple plumbing things, and they're building homes. So is that something that they were doing while you were growing up, or is it something that was finished and you were just surrounded by the legacy of that?
So my dad built the house when I was 2. All of my mom's like uncles, my mom's brothers, they're all like carpenters and, builders of the sort. And so is my dad. So I think for them, it was just like a normal day, like a normal work thing, except this time it was for family. And they built the house and they made it bigger than they had planned. So like my entire life was spent like every year we'd have a new project. Like we'd put in hardwood floors. My dad would build like bookcases, and I would draw them out too. Like as I got older, he actually built the house so that there would be like a bookcase in this one wall. And by the time I got to high school, he was finally going to do it. And I was like, no, the bookcase should go in this room. And I like drew it all out for him. And I was like, it should be built around the window with a window seat. And then he did it. And it was beautiful.
That's amazing. So was that what he did for a living? I mean, you said he was involved in sort of construction. Was his profession?
It was up until like we moved into that house. Then he became a manager at Lowe's, because it was more of like a steady income and he had 3 kids. So yes and no.
Well, and your family is like full of craftsmen, like artistic types. I read your great uncle made copper chests, which is amazing. I mean, just having so many creative people around you must have been pretty big. And didn't your father also like teach you to use woodworking equipment and power tools and all that?
So yes to all of the above. My great uncle did make these amazing copper chests. Yeah, everyone is kind of very like hands-on and creative in some sort of fashion. Like my mom loves to bake. And so my dad always wanted a son. He had 3 girls. So I would do all of like the projects with him. So yeah, I grew up like learning power tools, and he built our wood shop when I was in like 2nd or 3rd grade. So I started using power saws around that age.
Oh, wow.
And it was just kind of like when it came down to like, I didn't want to like frame my work anymore. I just like went outside and I was like, hey dad, like what should I use to cut this wood? And that's, so yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, and how did your own, being surrounded by so many different types of creativity, how did your own creativity manifest like initially? Did you draw a lot? Were you painting? Were you like building things? What was your initial interest?
So I kind of always wanted to be an artist. I actually remember like pre-kindergarten era a lot. I'd just like lock myself in my room and I'd like craft things out of paper, and like I'd make mailboxes for every room in the hallway, and like I'd make mail all day then for everyone. Like I just like was always doing something and drawing. So I feel like maybe being around all of it, it just kind of comes naturally.
Sure, yeah. And didn't you have a really like influential drawing class in high school? I read that there was a pretty big experience in high school as far as drawing goes. I guess what was it about that experience that connected with you so much?
So my high school teacher was amazing. She didn't teach in the way of like, we make still lifes in like this boring, stiff way. She always taught us to have a lot of like meaning behind our work and focused on that, and ways to incorporate that into our like fundamental drawing sessions. So like instead of drawing a still life, she'd be like, we're going to make like a game of life themed like pieces, and we're going to bring in like board games, and like you're going to make this about your life and like but still be doing still lifes. And yeah, I just think she really just inspired me and taught me how to not only draw technically well, but like how to really put myself into the work.
Well, was that when, I guess, 2D visual art, drawing, painting really started to become your main focus? Was that what helped you kind of zero in on that with all these other things that you might have gone towards?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, very cool. And so, I guess when it came time to go to college, I believe you started out going to community college for the first couple of years with a focus on fine art. Was that in your hometown? Was that or near Nazareth?
Yeah, that was in my hometown. I went to Northampton Community College for 2 years. And yeah, it wasn't really my cup of tea, but like the experience was fine, I guess. I'm not really like a school person, I think. Okay.
Because I guess after that 2 years, you decided not to continue on, I guess, to a full-fledged art school. Was it just that you didn't like the sort of academic, classroom experience?
Yes. And I feel like I just didn't like being told what to make. And I guess also like college is so expensive, and I was just like, if I'm going to if I want to be a painter, I can't really take out just all these loans. Like it was like $100,000, like easy, So it was kind of both things, like not liking it, but also it just being so expensive.
Okay. So the return on investment didn't match how much you were putting towards it. I guess, are there aspects about what you would perceive a formal art education to be that you feel like you wish you had, like you missed out on?
I used to a lot. And now I don't, because I feel like if I would have gone to school, I just wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now, and I just think I needed to find it my own way.
Okay. So what did you do at that point then? Did you jump completely into your art practice, or did you go do other things, day job type work before returning back to your practice?
So, I jumped right into art. I lived at my parents' house and I just like stayed in the basement painting, and then I babysat very part-time, like 10 hours a week.
And had watercolor become your medium of choice at that point, or was that something that came later?
So watercolor became my medium of choice, I'd say, in high school. And that's part of the reason why I think maybe college didn't stick that well with me, because colleges don't tend to use watercolor. They tend to like push oils and like acrylics. So I've always had an inkling for watercolor.
How did you go about learning in the absence of any kind of formal education? What methods were you using for learning watercolor?
So in high school, I took classes with Andrew M. Kish III. He is an amazing watercolorist, and he taught me like his technique. And from there, I just like practiced and took what he said and like ran with it and just kept doing it over and over. So by the time I had dropped out of college, I was really just like already in the watercolor, you know?
Okay. And is that something that Andrew does as a professor? Like, is he a teacher, or is that something that you just kind of asked, hey, can I take lessons from you?
So his wife taught at my high school, and he came in one time for an artist talk, and he had this a studio at this place called the Banana Factory in Bethlehem, which is artist studios. And I reached out to him and like signed up for a class. And I was in a class with like all these old ladies, including my high school teacher's mother.
Okay.
So
very cool. At what point did you end up moving to Philly then?
So I moved to Philly, I think like 4 years ago. When I was 23, I moved here, and I'm going to be 27 soon. So
okay. Yeah,
about 4 years.
I guess, why Philly? What brought you there?
So my best friend from high school moved here when she went to college. She went to Tyler School of Art. And so I was just coming here all the time because of her. And then I started going to like First Fridays and going to art shows. And then I became more involved in like the Philly kind of art group that we have here. And then I was here like every single week, sometimes twice a week. So it just kind of made sense when it came like time to move that I was going to be moving here. Like everyone kind of knew, like it wasn't really a question. It was like, when's it happening?
That's awesome. No, and I mentioned this, too, before we started. I'm really impressed by the richness and sort of the unique nature of the art community there. Just from talking to some of the folks that I've had on before, it seems really cool.
Oh my gosh. The art scene here is out of this world. We totally have like a group going, and like we have barbecues like pre-pandemic, and it's just like such a welcoming like group of very talented people. Like not only is everyone so nice, but the talent and just like the drive that everyone has. It's so inspiring.
Well, and also just very inclusive. Outside looking in, it seems like everybody's just very welcoming and like, kind of championing each other, which I think is awesome. And so in 2016, you started showing, you work in group shows with, I guess, Gristle and which is in Brooklyn, and then Paradigm there in Philly. How did you first start getting your work noticed by galleries and making some of those connections? Instagram. Okay.
Yeah, just Paradigm, Sarah at Paradigm actually reached out to me. So, yeah, and then Gristle I applied to. But mainly it's just been Instagram and like people like finding my art through that platform. It's been amazing.
Okay, and then the next year you had your first solo show with Arch Enemy. So was it the same kind of thing? Arch Enemy discovered you, I guess, through Instagram, and maybe also some of the stuff that you'd done with Paradigm?
Yes, both of those things. So one of the workers at Arch Enemy at the time had purchased my piece at Paradigm.
Nice.
And then I was walking home from like a show one time, and Lauren at Arch Enemy, like I passed her on the street, and she was like, "Oh, do you want to be? I'm in a show." And I was like, "Yes, I do." And like from there, it just kind of like spiraled out.
Well, and that's, you mentioned Instagram, and that's one thing I wanted to talk to you about, because it's something that I've been quite impressed as far as how you approach your career, and, relating to some of the new ways that artists have for engaging with their communities. That the options that an artist has to interact with their community has changed so much in the last even 5 years. And maybe it's a product of you having largely defined what an art career even means, to yourself rather than having it told to you. But I feel like you've embraced a lot of these new methods for engagement a lot more than some others. How important has social media been to you as far as being a component of your career as an artist?
I mean, I wouldn't have an art career if it wasn't for social media. I met everyone through there and like all my connections. And I think it's really like we talk about like the college aspect, and I just feel like all of the old ways are like out the door. The ways that we were taught growing up, that's not the future. I think like the future is, unfortunately, in some ways, social media, but also like we're so lucky to have it. Especially someone like me, like I grew up, I'm like a weird artist type, and like it's hard to meet those people. So like jumping on Instagram and like learning that there's a whole community of people an hour away from where I lived, it was really awesome. So it's been really important to my career for sure.
Awesome. And I've noticed that you've started posting on TikTok too, which I don't see a ton of people on. I guess, what do you think about TikTok as an artist sharing your work?
I have a love-hate relationship with TikTok. First of all, I hate that I didn't get on it sooner because, you really have to like jump the gun with these things. Like you have to be on top of it and get it right away. Because then like, like Instagram right now, like the reach is harder. And I just worry that maybe TikTok might eventually be going in that direction. But it's a lot of work, like having to make the videos and having to think about filming as I'm painting, and like, cause I can't just sit down and paint anymore. It's like, oh, I have to take a clip this way, and I have to like, I can't forget, otherwise the whole thing's out the window and all the effort like that I put in is just gone. So it's a love-hate. Like it's great to have another platform to reach people, but it's a lot more work, and I know I understand why a lot of people like don't want to do it because it's annoying.
No. Do you set aside formally set aside time in your day for social media as far as, I guess editing or voiceover, stuff like that? Like, is it like a first class member of your schedule?
I try to, yes. Like I do, but also, like sometimes life happens and I can't like run my life around my phone, unfortunately. So yes and no.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you the origin of your social media name, because it's unique and it's what you use all over the place. So if you don't mind sharing, I'm curious where it came from.
So my friend and we had this like competition going as to who could wear the most velvet, like the longest. Like, let's see how many days we can go wearing velvet. And we had these rules in place. Like, if you didn't have like a velvet like clothes on, you had to have like at least 3 accessories, like a headband, a purse, like velvet, like a jacket, like velvet items. And so one night we're in my basement, and we're like starting like a gibberish band, like for fun. We're just being silly, like singing like glue shulu la, like things. And so we're like, well, we need a band name. So obviously Velvet had to be in the name. So we're there like spewing out like velvet couch, velvet flowers, like just velvet, like pairing it with things. And I was like, velvet mush. And I was like, wait, that one's really good. So that's how it happened, and it just stuck.
Awesome. I love that you guys had a contest around wearing velvet. That's amazing.
I have a lot of velvet.
So let's dive into your work a bit. And one thematic that you use quite a lot, and which I personally love, are your use of eyes. So I guess tell me about that. You clearly have a love for eyes, and I guess even you even have an eye in the emoji of your or an eye emoji in your Instagram name. I guess so. Why eyes in particular, and what made that such a big focus for you?
So it started out because I couldn't do them. So I like struggled painting them, especially in watercolor. So I just started it and like was practicing them over and over and over again. And then it got to the point where I was just adding them everywhere at that, and also I just think there's a lot of symbolism. Like I like the idea, like how eyes are referred to as the portal to our souls. And also just my own personal symbolism. Like I think it goes back to like social media. Like we're always kind of being watched, even when we're not, and I just really like, I don't know, I just resonate with them.
Very cool. Yeah, I know. I absolutely love, I mean, it's the first thing that I notice just when, interacting with a person. I think you can tell so much from a person's eyes, their emotional state, their mood, what they think of you. There's just so much reflection there. And you even have, I mean, it's timely, the day that we're recording this, you started your next eye challenge, which I guess will last for the next week. So tell me about that. When did you start doing these I know this is at least the second one, or you've done it before. What's that all about, and what are you doing for this one?
So my eye challenge is when I challenge all of my followers to make an eye a day, every day for like 2 weeks, 1 week. This time it's 1 week because it kind of just gets to be long. So I guess the point is just to create, it's just let's be creative. It doesn't have to be any particular, like you don't have to make a masterpiece. The idea is just to like get out there and be creative and have fun. I think I was saying in my post today, if you like squirted ketchup on the table, like that would count as your eye. Like it could be anything. You're
going to get that now. You know, you're going to get a bunch of ketchup and mustard eyes.
I really hope I do. Usually people get so like serious. I think because I'm like a very serious painter. So they translate it as like, we need to make this serious. And that's cool. But yeah, I just wanted to create a sense of like community, especially since social media can be exhausting. And I do kind of like fall back on my comments and stuff. So it's a great time for me to interact with people, but also like share and support other artists.
Sure. No, that's awesome. So another thing that another kind of distinctive aspect of your work that, again, I'm a huge fan of, and I'm sure you hear this a lot, is your color palette, your use of color. You're much more muted, kind of earthy and natural colors, and which I really love. How intentional is that? How intentional is your use of color? Is it something you really spend a lot of time thinking about up front, or plan out?
So I would say it's very intentional. I actually get asked a lot why I don't paint more bright. Like a lot of people are like, you should use brighter colors. And I'm just like, no.
Don't listen to them.
Exactly.
They're horrible people, whoever they are.
Exactly. So I'd say it's intentional, but it's also just like, I don't really try, if that makes sense. Like to me, they're just kind of like the colors that I use. Like I just like to paint very moody, like tones. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, for sure. Do you use colors in any kind of symbolic way? Like do colors represent certain feelings or ideas?
So right now I've been using a lot of like red and painting things like full red. And I'd say that's like a good example of like when a color has like a meaning. So when if I have like a person that's all red, it would kind of symbolize like them being in like a different world, a different mindset, like kind of outside of the body.
So I guess tell me about that. Like what brought that about? When did you start associating, the color red with that feeling of otherness or whatever?
So I started it because red is kind of the first layer I put down on all of my paintings. It kind of just like locks in the graphite lines so I'm not smearing. And I wanted to show through into my final lines or like at the beginning lines. So to me, it's kind of like a beginning stage type of thing. So it's like it's showing you what's underneath. And from there, I've just been exaggerating it and making it like a full monochromatic red because it's just like stronger sometimes.
Oh, very cool. And kind of one interesting motif that has evolved out of your use of color is your inclusion of these sort of rainbows or ribbons that stream and connect different things together. And it's like your rainbow, with your distinctive palette, which I really like. How did that originate? And is there, I guess, meaning behind your use of that?
There is meaning. I'd say it originated It originated a few years ago. Like, I started to stretch people out into lines, and I just, like, it's just kind of how I felt at the time. Like, you're just kind of fading out into, like, nothing. And I liked the idea of taking, like, figurative things and just turning it into, like, the color. And you could see my color palette and, like, my rainbow. And from there, I've just been, like, playing with that, and like with the eyes, especially with the eyes, as we had like discussed, have so much meaning and like so much, and they can tell you so much about a person. So like when I do that with the eyes, I think it's like dragging out that feeling from the character.
Okay. And your use of, we've talked several times about occasions where you've used different things to symbolize a feeling or an idea. Do you use symbols in that way to be like narrative? Like, are you telling stories or feelings and emotions with your work?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm telling stories and feelings. I feel like it's always one of those things that can be hard to talk about, because the reason I'll start off doing something, like, as I'm working, like, I may have started off with, like, making, let's say, like, the ribbon eye because of, like, fading into nothing. But then as I'm working on it, like, the meaning evolves and turns into new things. So it's like, it might have started out with one meaning, but then it ends up with, like, maybe 12 other meanings that I hadn't intended, if that makes sense. So, like, the meaning and stuff isn't really something that can be translated into words. I'd say it's more of, like, a feeling in essence. I don't know. That's what I'm trying to capture.
And are those feelings? And that makes a lot of sense, because I wasn't sure if it was an actual like story that you could articulate, or if it was more of just an expression or an emotion. So that I really kind of can relate to that. Are these feelings and emotions and kind of, I guess, stories that you're trying to tell, are they personal stories? Are these feelings that you're trying to express from yourself, or are you capturing something else outside of you?
So I view all of my paintings as self-portraits. Even the eyes, even the, like, if I paint anything, I'm very much telling just me. They're kind of my journals in picture form. It's like, here's all that I have on the table. You can look at it. I'm not going to tell you about it, but you can see it and interpret it in any way that you want.
Is that, I mean, kind of exposing yourself in that way, that's certainly a vulnerable thing. Is that difficult to sort of open yourself up like that and shine a light on it for the world to see? Yes
and no, because I feel like art has been the one area where I could do that, because I can hide it. I can say everything that I want to say. I can share all of my feelings, but I never actually have to say the words. I never actually have to, like, elaborate or explain. And I think, that's probably why I can't stop doing it. It's like my therapy.
No, that's very cool. I like that. And you mentioned earlier when we were talking about woodworking and your father's woodworking, that you use unique shapes in your work. I think that's interesting. I guess at what point did that enter into your practice, where you stopped framing your pieces and started using these more unique shapes?
So, when I was in Easton, like, Easton, PA has a little art knit scene, and we were doing this thing every year they did. It's called, like, Deck the Halls, and they'd make skateboard decks. So that was my first time really. I was trying to do the skateboard deck. It really didn't come out that great. It was my first one. And so I was ripping apart watercolor and, like, trying to collage on paintings in this, like, on this skateboard deck. And I made these little, like, ivies, which, like, an eye on a leaf, like the pun ivy. And they had, like, this ripped edge, and I painted it, and it looked, like, super cool. And they didn't end up on the deck, and I just kind of had it, like, sitting around. And the more I looked at it, the more I just always, like, loved the rawness of the edge and, like, the ripped paper. And I wasn't sure how do you go about selling that? How do you, take that and have it as that shape? So I ended up selling those eyes, the ivies, to my friend Rebecca Reeves, who I just had a show with in December. And other people had reached out like, hey, like, we'd love them too. And I was like, okay, like, how do I actually sell these then? So that way they're like paintings, and like not in glass and can have the shape. So it was those pieces that made me realize like, oh, like, what if I put this on wood? And from there, I like started cutting my own wood.
Okay, interesting. And I mean, it's even evolved to the point where you have multiple pieces connected together with string. Like, I guess, was that sort of a natural evolution of your use of shapes, just seeing how far you could push it?
Yeah, definitely. And I used to do these like doodles in high school and like grade school, like where like these swirls would all like connect and fit in together. And I feel like I've taken that and like mixed my wood paintings together, and just like the way that they connect together. Like, I think it's all a very strong evolution of like my past to now.
How did the logistics of those custom shapes work? I guess from a conceptual point of view, like, do you plan your entire composition along with the shape of the piece, or do you kind of figure the shape out first and then work within those constraints? Like does the content, I guess, drive the shape, or does the shape drive the content, I guess, is a more concise way to put it?
Both. Okay. So I have in my room at all times like 2 big bins of pre-cut wood that I have. And then I hardly ever use them because I'm always making new shapes. So so sometimes it's like I love this shape, let's make something for it. And then other times, especially like lately, it's been like, I'm going to cut the wood to whatever I want, like shape I'm currently working on. So it's both things.
How do you shape them? Do you cut them yourself? Do you have a bunch of woodworking equipment for that?
Yeah, I cut them myself, and living in the city, it's really funny. Right now I currently like walk a block and a half to my best friend Gina Altadana's house, and I like bring the stool that I'm sitting on right now and I clamp the wood to it. And I just, in front of her house, just cut. Like, people look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm cool with it.
It's amazing. Very cool. And you, like we were talking about earlier, you work pretty much exclusively in watercolor. I guess, what is it about watercolor as a medium that you like so much, opposed to oil, acrylic, whatever?
I really like that. I like that what I'm doing with watercolor is kind of its own thing. I don't know, like when I was working with oil, I had trouble maybe just finding my own voice with it, whereas with watercolor, it just came really easily. And I feel like I'm making something that I personally haven't really seen before. And that, like, it feels good to have my own thing. You know, I'm a middle child. I didn't have a lot of my own things. So...
I guess, are there challenges that you've encountered using watercolor? I mean, does it make you approach your work differently than you might with other mediums?
Absolutely. Everything I do has to be planned out. I can't make a mistake or the painting has to be thrown away. Like, there's no going over. It's very much like whatever you start with and intend is it, which can be very stressful because, like, I don't have if you're working in oil or acrylics, you can be like, oh, you know what? I want to add like an eye in that person's head, like after all the hair is painted in. And with watercolor, like, I don't have that option. It has to be thought out in advance, which is cool, but it's like very challenging, which I also think is what draws me to the medium, is I like the challenge of it.
Okay, very cool. And I guess, how do you arrive at your ideas for new works? Do you sketch a lot in sketchbooks? Do you do photo shoots, word lists? Like, what is some of the techniques that you use for generating ideas?
So I kind of just scribble things down on paper and like make like little notes. Right now I actually have a wall in my studio that's like, I've taped up like about like 100 scribbles so I could just like view them together as a group. And then sometimes I'll have a photo shoots, and then I'll make ideas inspired off of like the reference, but usually it's just a scribble first.
Okay. And once you have a solid idea for a piece, I guess, where do you go from there? Do you draw out a more refined drawing, or use digital tools to build your composition? Like, what's your next step?
So after the scribble, I work on the reference. So I take the reference photo, whether it's like a picture of my sister or a friend. And then from there, lately I've been taking the shape that I'm going to work with and then digitally figuring out the composition. And I just got an iPad about like a little less than a year ago, and it's really changed how I approach this because now I can, in like 10 minutes, I can have a full mock-up of the full painting. So I can see kind of what it's going to look like before I start, which I really like because like in the past I'd start pieces and would be like, like I should have, done this first because like, again, with watercolor, it all has to be planned out. Yeah. So it's really nice to have the tool to like see it first without spending like hours and hours working on it.
So do you use photo reference for most of your works?
For all of my work, yes.
Okay. And I guess how does that work? I know your sister's a photographer, which I believe the cover of this episode's a photo that she took, which again goes back to how just truly creative your family is in general. Do you work with her a lot on these photo shoots? Is that something that you guys collaborate on a lot?
Yes. So it kind of starts back in high school. My high school teacher was always a take your own photo type of person, and she taught us how to like set up the lighting and like would encourage us to photograph our friends and our family, and like was really against us using pictures off of the internet for like obvious copyright reasons. So I started doing that in high school and using my sister a lot as my reference because she was home. And so I feel like she kind of like just grew up into like my weird, like, okay, I'm going to lay in the snow in like a wedding gown today. Like snap the picture. Like
super normal. That's a super normal day.
So yeah, we collaborate a lot and it's great.
Very cool. So you also enjoy photography. I know she's a photographer, but you like to take, I mean, I saw you like on your Instagram, I don't know what the situation was, but you had an empty room that you took an opportunity to fill entirely with pillow stuffing just for a photograph. It's like, that's such an interesting instinct. Like when I'm moving out of a place, I'm thinking about what I'm doing next or cleaning up the place. You thought, let's just put a bunch of stuffing around and take a photo.
I did though.
I mean, but I think that speaks to your photographer's instinct. Like, does that something that kind of comes natural to you?
I think so. I think I'm just always looking for ways to be creative, and I like photography. Like, I'm not a serious photographer. I would not like label myself as such. I just really like having, like, sometimes you want to get the idea out faster. And with paintings, it's so like, my paintings could take like hundreds of hours depending on the size. But yeah, I did my last bedroom in my last apartment. I was like, I'm going to have this empty for a week. What do I do? So I was just like, I know I have to fill the whole room with stuffing. And I like went out and bought like $200 of stuffing, and it was worth every cent. I still have it.
Yeah, what do you do with $200 of stuffing after that?
So I do have a plan. We're going to reuse it again. It's going to be great. And that was just me. That was a self-timer photo shoot. Like, I'm alone in this apartment filling stuffing all over the place, like self-timering and posing. Had no idea what the pictures were going to look like. It was great.
That's awesome. Is it something, I mean, photography, is it something you would want to explore more and make a bigger part of your work?
I think it's always going to be a part of my work because, I mean, it's a step in my process for sure. And yeah, I'll probably do it forever. Not seriously, just for fun.
I guess once you're ready to start on your final piece, I noticed that you seem to draw out kind of loose pencil on the final piece of paper. Is that your typical process? Do you start with the pencil drawing before you start painting?
Yes. Because again, like a watercolor has to be very planned out. So I start with a very thin outline, very light. That way the paint can go over it and you won't see it through.
Okay. And all of this is taking place on paper before you've mounted it to the wood, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so I guess how does that, once you're finished with it, how do you cut the piece to shape so that it fits the wood? And I guess how does that mounting process work?
So I cut the paper before I draw it. That way I don't like paint and then like the razor blade slips and, ruins it. Like, it's just, you have to like cut it first. And then quite often I'll cut the wood to fit the paper then, or vice versa. And I have the wood cut and I'll just like kind of match it up. So yeah, it's like it goes many ways.
Okay. And then what, I guess, is it some kind of adhesive that you use to seal it to the wood?
Yeah, I use golden products for my mounting and varnishing.
Okay, awesome. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk with you about the show. You mentioned it earlier, the show that you just had with Rebecca Reeves at Arch Enemy, because I think there's several notable things about that show, which from what I understand was something that you guys have been wanting to do for a while. So tell me about that. How did that finally come together after wanting to do it for so long?
Well, as I mentioned, Rebecca purchased art from me like years ago. So we've known each other for a while. We're from the same neck of the woods. And when I became involved in the Philly art scene, it was really nice to have someone else that I knew like already involved in it. So we became closer at that point, and we both have always shared a love for eyes. So it just like the more and more that we became like friends, the more that we'd be like, oh, like we should have a show together. And we talk about it just more and more throughout the years, like, and becoming more and more serious, like each time that we spoke about it. And so finally last year when I was working for Arch Enemy as their assistant, I actually asked for the show.
Okay.
I was just like, hey, can we have a show? And they were like, sure. So it was great.
That's awesome. And I mean, it was collaborative in the sense that you guys had some pieces that were completely collaborative, and then the theme in general, it seemed like you worked together on. So I guess how close was that collaboration? Was it more just high level concept, kind of developing the initial concept and then working in your separate ways from there, or was it a lot closer where you were more involved throughout?
It was a little bit of both. So we met up like pre-pandemic, and we would like go over plans for the collabs. And then we'd also would like check in about like once a month and like FaceTime and show each other like what we're working on, and like kind of seeing how our pieces like relate. And that's also why a lot of my work from that show was like dangling with string, because I wanted it to fit her work a little bit more, because she has a lot of string in her work.
Nice. That's awesome. Do you like collaborating? I mean, you mentioned you work with your sister a lot on collaborating. You had a piece with Kate McCormack, which is in Arch Enemy's 9th anniversary show. You did this show with Rebecca. Is it something that you feel comfortable with and like to do?
I do like to do it. It's really fun to like be creative with your friends, and especially when you find friends that want to be creative in the same ways as you. Like, not everyone's gonna, let you cover them in blood. So like, if you find someone that will let you cover them in blood, you know that you found a friend, and you should probably do that stuff more often together.
That we should quote that. That's an amazing quote.
Thank you.
Very cool. So another notable thing about that show with Rebecca is that you also had a piece of your poetry integrated into one of the works, which again, I guess back to opening yourself up and sort of the vulnerability involved in that. That must have taken a lot of courage to do, because I know you don't typically share a lot of that. Do you write much poetry yourself? I
write a lot of like things in my sketchbooks as I'm like scribbling in them, if that makes sense. I'm actually started a book project that's going to be a lot of like things similar to that piece, where I like have like these vague like descriptions for things. So yeah, it was very vulnerable. I'm not really a word person. I have a stutter, and I grew up like with a very bad speech impediment. It's gotten better in my older years. But I kind of have always been afraid of words for that reason. So like sharing them and like, yeah, it's makes me nervous to even talk about, but yeah.
No, I totally understand. Yeah.
It's also freeing in that sense though.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, I guess with this book project, is that something that would be both art and poetry? Is it just poetry? What's the plan for that?
It's going to be like at least 100 of my paintings. Mainly, it's going to be like my full paintings with like words, and I'm going to paint the entire thing. So all of like the letters are going to be painted. Oh, wow. It's all, yeah, it's going to be, it might be like a 2 to 3 year long project. So I'm really excited, but also if it gets like really personal, I may never share it. So. Okay.
Well, now you've talked about it, so you're sort of on the hook now, I think.
I don't know. I can always back out. Whatever.
Fair enough. So, and I think it was around the same time, shifting gears a little bit, I think it was around the same time as that show came out, or a bit before the show that you had with Rebecca, where you actually took some time off from your art. And I think you mentioned in your social media that you're feeling a little burned out and had to step away for a bit. So I guess if you're comfortable talking about it, I'm curious to know a bit more about that. I think it's definitely something that I can relate to, and I think probably a lot of the people listening can relate to just after the exhausting year that we've had, in general. But I think just social media and a lot of the pull from that can be exhausting. So I'm glad. I guess first of all, I'm glad that you recognized that and really took steps to do something about it. So I guess what led to that? I guess what was your was that something that you kind of set a timeline for? Did you say I'm going to start here and end here? It was an open-ended thing. What was the nature of it?
So being an artist and like, especially working and having my income be so reliant on my, like how much art I make, it really wears on you. And it's like every day I wake up and I'm like, I have to work. I have to get stuff done. And so that times like years, I just was feeling like I just can't do it anymore. Like, I don't know. And when you're making art for the purpose of like having money, it loses meaning. So you're just like, I feel like a human printer sometimes. And I'm just like out here, just got to get this done. And I feel like I don't even have to be present to paint anymore. Like I can just be fully like not even paying attention and like paint because it's just become that ingrained. And when you get to that point, it just starts to feel like pointless. And I think with the pandemic, I actually moved in with a family that I babysit for part-time for 3 months, the first 3 months of the pandemic, because they were like, we were all scared, obviously. And I was just like, you know what? I don't know what money's going to look like. Like, it would be nice to just, like, not have to really worry. And it was great. But also, like, I'm living with kids. I'm not in my house. Like, it was time to slow down. Like, with the world, it was just time for me to stop and to focus more on, like, my mental health. I started going to therapy. I started getting on, like, a medication. And, like, slowly I've been working on, like, doing more and more. There was no timeline. I'm just trying to, like, slow down. I'm, like, a very like, I will work from the minute I wake up until the minute I go to bed, and then I'll sleep for 4 hours and I'll get up and I'll do it all again, for like months. And I just run on empty. Like one time I made a 9-foot painting for Bombay Sapphire for like a big like New York project. I made it in 2 weeks. Oh. And I had mono. Oh, wow. And I got it done.
That's amazing. So I guess coming out of this experience, you think there's going to be changes to kind of the way that you approach your work or craft to try to scale that back so it doesn't happen again?
Absolutely. Like, I need to make more time for myself. I need to make time for fun. Like, I will get so serious with my work, I won't allow any fun time. Like, my friends won't see me. I will not leave my apartment for like literally like over a week at a time. Like I won't see the sun. Like I go a little bit too extreme. So I can't continue that way. Like obviously, like no one can. So yes, I'm going to be working on like making more time for me, which I have, slowing down. Like I don't have to make every painting this minute, you know, like,
Right.
but also like I'm trying to work on trying to do less like commissions. I'm trying to cut back on shows. I'm trying to like focus on things that are important to me, like this book project that I may or may not share with the world. And yeah, just pieces that I need to make for my soul, you know?
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, like I said, it's good that you recognize that, because I think a lot of people just continue running on empty until they just break down. I guess, was it hard for you to disconnect from that for so long? Like, is that you're just not having that sort of creative outlet, or were you doing other things?
I mean, even when I'm not working, I'm working. So, so like my version of not doing a lot of work is still like, I'm still doing stuff, just less of it. And I'm not staying up all night to work on something. I will I will get more sleep. So I was working, just like significantly less.
I guess, have you started, I guess, back into your somewhat regular routine? Have you scaled that back a little bit? Have you started working again, or is it still on pause?
I am working. I feel like I'm just always going to be one of those people who's not fully content with their amount of work that they're getting done. And I'm trying to like recognize that and to kind of take each day and instead of being like, I have to get my whole list of stuff done, just being like, whatever I get done, you know, and just like learning to be okay with that. So I am working, and I'm really working on just, you know, accepting I'm not getting as much done as I really, really want to.
Sure. No, I think that's healthy. Was it difficult to get back into that routine after taking some time off?
Oh yeah. Like I was like talking to my therapist about it. Like every day, like I just can't work. I'm just laying in bed. Like I'd just come home and just like lay in bed all night in silence, because it was just like, I was that level of overwhelmed. Like I couldn't watch TV. So it's just kind of inching it back in slowly and like really learning to say no to the things I don't want to do, which I'm really not good at. So
it's good that you recognize that that's something to I guess work on. Let's talk about what you have coming up. I know that you recently finished a piece for I think you finished it, but for Beautiful Bazaar's Lucid Dreaming show, which is at Copro, which I believe will already be open by the time this comes out, but it won't close until May 15th. What was it like working with Beautiful Bazaar and Copro? Had you done stuff with them before?
So this is my first time working with Copro. I've been to their gallery before when I was in LA, and it's a beautiful space, and I've been wanting to show there. But I'm just not like a pushy person, you know. I'm not going to be like, here's my art, show me, you know. So I was very excited to be like working with them, and Beautiful Bazaar too. So it's not my first time working with them because of my gallery in New York, Stone Sparrow. I've worked with Beautiful Bazaar because of them, and it's been great. Just like meeting them and like, I don't know, it's such like a dream come true, you know?
That's awesome. And I guess what does the rest of 2021 look like for you? What are you focusing on next?
So the Lucid Dreaming show closes, and then my friend Rachel Bridge has a solo show at Copro the next month. So next in May, I will be going to LA with my friends Buddy Nestor and Rachel Bridge for Rachel's show. So that's not for me, but it's still coming up, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
And I might take on one more group show this year, but I think I'm going to try to leave my schedule empty and like just kind of focus on less deadlines, more my own work, because as I've mentioned mentally, it's just kind of time to just stop the deadlines. It's been madness. I need a small break.
For sure. Do you think the kind of the stuff that you have been working on just for your own self, do you think that will ultimately culminate in some kind of a solo show to share that, at some point later?
So that's kind of my plan with what I'm doing right now is I kind of just want to like I said, like I don't want the deadlines. So I want to be working on, I have so many pieces like started laying around, and I kind of just want to work on starting a giant body of work without the pressure of having to have everything done, so I don't have to feel rushed. And then with my book project, when I finish it, I would like to hopefully have a solo show like with all of the pieces that are in the book.
Awesome. So like a launching sort of thing when the book comes out. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I guess any new print releases that you like to put on people's radar?
None that I can say right now, but I probably will be releasing some prints around my birthday.
Okay. Very
in
cool.
June.
Something to look forward to, I guess. And tell me, so I noticed you have a story on your Instagram about a piece that you damaged that you started working on. Something happened, I think a door closed on it, but you're still working on it anyway. So tell me about that. Like what's the story there? Do you think it can be salvaged?
So I'm working on, it's two identical, but not actually because I'm not a printer, So the idea is like two identical portraits side by side, and they're done. So I just have like their bodies and and the background. And when I was moving into my current apartment, I had it up on a shelf like behind my front door. And when I closed the door to leave, it must have like fallen. So when I opened the door to come back in, the door just like slid over tightly. Wow. And it has one of those like things, to like keep like the cold air out. So I don't know if it's salvageable. I've had this painting on the back burner for over a year now. I'm just like, maybe once every 3 months, I've pulled it out and spent like an hour or two on it. Like I just haven't been working on it because I've been burned out and like been wanting to just do kind of smaller things that aren't so like daunting. And now that it might be damaged, it's even more daunting because I'm like, do I really want to spend the time for it to be damaged? So I think it's going to be fine. Okay. I think so far I'm feeling good. I started working on like sections that have been door slid and it's been fine so far. So I think I might save this one. I might get lucky, but we'll find out.
Awesome. Very cool. So I guess where can people find you online so they can stay up to date with all the stuff you're working on?
Instagram's number one. It's just like second nature at this point to just be like, oh, let's go to Instagram. But TikTok, Patreon, I don't use Facebook. Like I have a page and people follow it, but like there's not even like a picture on it. So I would not say that's where you can find me.
So last question, and this is something that I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
I think my friend Brahman Lorelei. She'd be really fun to interview.
Very cool. Is that somebody there in Philly?
So she was in Philly. Brahman's kind of moved all over. And in the pandemic, we actually said goodbye to each other through like a glass door, and she moved away to live with some family. And now she just moved to New Orleans. So if you're down there, you guys can see her around. She's amazing.
Michelle, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. This has been a real treat.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
Awesome. Very cool. So we'll cut there. What'd you think?
It was good. What'd you think?
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Michelle. I was really impressed by what Michelle had to say about her experience with burnout and what she's been doing to address it. It's great that she was able to, step back and recognize it for what it is. And, the effect that constant grind she was on for so long was having on her mental health. And then to take the important steps, to actually do something about it. First by, taking some time away completely to, recover and clear her head. And then once she felt, a little bit more renewed, a little bit more restored, slowly easing back into things, with the addition of therapy, which is fantastic. Evaluating along the way, what needs to change in the future so that she doesn't have to go through that again. Another big component to that is learning to say no to projects that she just doesn't have time for or isn't quite the best fit. Doing fewer group shows and focusing more on creating work that she loves and is important to her. That's not an easy thing to do, to be able to, step back and notice in the moment. It's much simpler in a lot of ways, unfortunately, to, just keep running full speed ahead and grinding yourself down just more and more, just because that's what you're used to, and eventually going that way, something's going to break. And taking these kinds of preventative steps, isn't the easiest thing, but it's necessary in a lot of ways. And it's great that she was able to start working through that sooner rather than later. I was really excited to hear about this new book project that she's working on. I really love what she had, to say about her plans for it. Having the book be this, super artistic presentation of her poetry coupled with art. With even like the text portions being hand painted. That's super cool. I love it. And then to possibly couple that with a large exhibition filled with, the personal work that she'll have created between, now and the time that she finishes it, that would make for a pretty special event and, one that I'm definitely eager to see unfold. Be sure to follow her Instagram to see how that all develops. So thanks again to Michelle for joining me today. And thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. And just a reminder, one big way you can help out if you're really enjoying the show would be to check out the show's new Patreon. You can find all the details on patreon.com/artaffairs. And as always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairs.podcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairs.podcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.